you. Please.
Especially thanks to our presenters. We're talking today an important topic about practices in program management and distance learning. I think we have the wrong slide there. We're talking about distance learning, which is part of our series of program practices. That's really growing interest and concern in the field to provide instruction online rather than in person or rather face-to-face because of the costs and the number we can reach, as well as other ways that more effectively provide information. So I'll turn it over to right now. I'm going to thank you again and turn it over to Marcella, who's going to introduce speakers and give us a little bit more about today's event.
Thank you all for joining us. Myris, please try to use the voice call-in number that I provided in the chat pod rather than the voice over IP. I think that will definitely help a lot and help with clarity of what you can hear. So I just want to go over with you quickly an introduction to our webinar series in case you're not familiar with it. Then we'll have 8 presentations and we'll have plenty of time for questions. I ask that you hold off responses to your questions until the end, but we can take advantage of our chat feature that we have available to us here. You can feel to type in any questions that do come to mind as presentations, but again, we'll get responses from answers at the end. To give you some background on the webinar itself, the NRS project's ongoing efforts to help states and programs improve their use of data for program improvement. In our webinars, we look at a specific strategy that is known as a practice in the field that we can use for program improvement. This webinar started in response to receiving questions from about these strategies. We heard states saying, "This sounds, but what does it look like in practice? What do we need to have in place to really get started?" And so to answer those questions, we're going to hear from states that have successfully implemented these strategies, and hearing from Minnesota and Ohio about their distance learning programs have in place and how they put it into place, and we'll get some tips from them on that you'll be able to try within your own state and work toward that for yourself. Okay, so today is distance learning. I wanted to take a look at the NRS distance learning policy, but before we begin, I would take a quick poll so that I and our presenters can get a better sense of who is on the call and who our audience is. So it could either raise by clicking the below the list or check mark. If you do have a distance learning policy in place within or at your program, while to answer that. So like it's really evenly split between states do and don't have the policies in place. You know, if you do plan to have one, or even sometimes it's good to check to make sure that you have in place, you have the right thing in place. I'm going to talk to you a bit about what the NRS distance learning policy is. The policy does a few first. It defines what distance education is and what distance education learners are. It describes how to measure contact hours assessment procedures, and how to work on distance education. So these are all very important components of SAFE. So first, education is defined as a formal learning activity where student instructors are separated by geography, time, or both for the limited instructional period. And very much like classroom instruction, it can be delivered through many different formats. Recording, videotape, broadcast, computer software, web, etc. There's no limit as to what you can do. And of course, it's because doing it at a distance, it's supported with communication via mail, phone, email, or other online technology software. And so, distance education student, these are students who, the name suggests, are getting distance education instruction. And it also includes students who do have some traditional classroom instruction, so they can be both and who have some in the classroom and some out of the classroom instruction. And so policy should define how the local programs should think about these students. And so for students that have a mixture of instruction, you can count your students once. You can't count them both for traditional classroom and for distance education. You need to select them once. You can't get credit for both. Okay. Now, just like your regular traditional classroom students, they need to have 24 hours or more of contact to be counted. And that's just what the is in general for all students. So this, however, the difference is that it can be a combination of face-to-face contact and or contact through the telephone, video, teleconference, any other way that the student interacts, but must be able to identify the student. So it can't be an anonymous website, for example. The student can also be measured, the hours can also be measured using proxy hours. So you could use time to tell you how long the student was engaged with using the program. Or the teacher can identify the number of hours that an assignment should take, and so students who complete those assignments are assumed to have taken that number of hours and to get credit for that. And then you can also track by using the number of hours that it would take to get mastery of the content that you need to have mastery of the class stuff for an assignment. And so match the curricula and be described explicitly in the state policy. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, assessment is, of course, a critical part in our NRS as a whole. And so working with distance learners, it's no different. They need to be pre and post tested like all others. And the post test time, the contact hours can be measured by proxy hours. And the state policy should specify that. The assessment must be face-to-face. At a sentence proctored by program or state staff. And again, one of the differences is that we report our students that are distance learners a little bit differently. We use Table 4A and Table 5A for reporting. And you include contact hours, including your proxy hours, in Table 4. Okay, and now before we move on to Minnesota's presentation, I'd like to give you a chance to take a look at the distance learning that we offer through the NRS, because of course we view it here as a project, And so we want to see so that you can see what it we do to implement this kind of thing.
Hi everyone, this is Delphina Brown, and I am an instructional design specialist on the NRS support project, and I want to just give you a preview of some of the online courses that we offer through our NRS website and talk a little about the facilitate courses that we offer as well. So give me a moment while I try to share my screen. So I pulled up for you the NRS main webpage, which is newly redesigned. For those of you who visit the site frequently, you might notice our new layout. But from our NRS web homepage, you can access several different self-paced online courses. Self-paced means that they're accessible any day of the week, anytime you want to complete them, and you do them at your own pace. And to the courses, you would go to the training and activities section and on online courses. It's a site. There's some information here to give you an overview of the types of courses you'll find and some getting started information as well to help you create a username and login account for the online courses. And we have a self-evaluation form that might be helpful to those people wondering what courses to begin with. Actually, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise as I'm speaking, so I think someone's line is unmuted. If you don't mind just muting that, it can help everyone hear a little clearer. Thanks. So the evaluation form is a multiple choice type question about different topics that are covered in our courses. And as you complete this, you'll get a list of courses that we recommend you take. And courses range from very basic information about the reporting requirements to courses on how to improve your data quality and how to report data. There's a very detailed description of each course that lets you know how long it'll take to complete and what the course topics cover. I'll go back here. This is me scrolling through the description of the different courses. So with each description, there's an estimate how much time it'll take to complete, and different sections of the courses are listed. They're available to support anyone looking for a course to take. If you have questions about that and want to contact me, you can send an email to nrs@air.org. We'd be more than happy to assist you with that. To our other site where we offer online courses. These are our facilitated courses that we run on our Moodle learning management system. And these courses we offer at specific times throughout the project to cohorts of folks who are looking to a community learning experience together. And those topics are usually around NRS basics. We have a course on distance learning, and one on how to develop report cards. So these courses usually get announced through our newsletter. We send emails out to the state directors announcing the enrollment, and they tend to last for about 8 weeks once we start them. So if you're interested in a facilitated learning experience, keep an eye out for announcements about when we're opening enrollment for those.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Delphina. Again, we want to show you that we too really take advantage of distance learning, and we value it here at the Now Reporting System Support Project. So now I wanted to give you a sense of what others are doing. And so to help us with that, we're going to ask Minnesota to share with us about their policy, their system they had in place. And we will hand over control of the screen to Renata. And
can you hear us?
yes, now we can. Thanks, Tom. We'll just scroll through.
All right. So Renan and I work with as a staff on a statewide distance learning program in Minnesota that we'll be talking a little bit about the history of and how we developed and what we do and what we've been able to accomplish with that. So I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of background about how distance learning developed in Minnesota ABE. I've been involved with the program from the beginning. And prior to 2010, there was a little bit of distance learning scattered in a few Minnesota ABE programs here and there. There was no particular coordination of it. It just sort of, if you had a program manager or a teacher who was very interested in it, they might make some effort to start something. But it wasn't coordinated, and it wasn't necessarily, there was no consistent quality control or anything like that. But at the time, there was growing awareness at the state staff level that distance learning was increasingly important, and more local programs were starting to express some interest in implementing distance learning, although they weren't really quite sure how. We got very lucky because we are lucky enough to have really very good state ABE funding in addition to our federal funds, and part of the legislation is that 3% of our state funding is available for what are called supplemental services grants. And those are defined as projects that build capacity statewide throughout ABE programming. Right now, I believe there's probably about 8 of those, and they cover everything from distance learning. There's a large professional development effort. We have a site that works with people with provide sources for working with student disabilities. There's a technology supplemental service provider, and quite a number of them. So, which you will see as we go on, that funding really has been very important, having some good service capacity statewide. St. Paul, we have a consortium in St. Paul called the St. Paul Community Literacy Consortium, which involves the St. Paul Public Schools, Adult Learning, and about currently 9 community-based nonprofit organizations. So Hubs, on behalf of the consortium, applied for the first supplemental services grant in 2010. And the purposes at that point were to convene and services to foster the development and use of distance learning statewide, to kind of build on what was already there, also to assess what was there and what was needed, in developing some content for occupational prep courses at that point, although we've gone way beyond that, and provide some means of technical staff support. As in most states, Minnesota is got some very heavily urban area with a lot of population and a lot of resources, and then a lot of more agricultural and rural greater Minnesota areas with very populated, not as much access to technology, but still very important to have some access to the technology. So during the first year, we mostly did designed a comprehensive online survey and asked all of the consortia in the state, of whom there are now about 45, I believe, to complete this survey, and almost all of them did. That survey asked them for information about what they were currently doing, asked them what they would like doing in the area of distance learning, asked them to identify barriers to accomplishing what they would like to accomplish, and asked questions about what resources they would need. And we put that together into a report, the results of that. And then we also did a lot of research to find out what was happening in other states and nationwide, and came up with a report that combined the results of our survey and our national research, and came up with some recommendations regarding what we thought would be best practices for development and delivery of distance learning in Minnesota. Also created the first year, which has continued, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, a virtual task force to make policy recommendations to the state office. There is a state distance learning policy that has evolved a lot over the years, and our virtual task force is made up of about 20 instructor managers statewide who have some facility and knowledge of distance learning and are interested in continuing to help the spread distance learning and improve it and enhance it throughout the state. Since that time, our grant has been renewed annually. We're very fortunate in that. The distance learners statewide have really grown every year pretty significantly. We had over 181,000 proxy hours last year, and we're continuing to see that growth each year as time goes on.
I'm going to talk about the current grant. Has a lot of professional development, which we'll talk about later as well, just how important we find that to be. We have two classes kind of based on Project Ideals, DL 101 and DL 102, although they have grown quite a bit since they started. And our classes for people around the state, they have a face-to-face class at the beginning, and then a series of webinars throughout the year where both teachers and managers can work through projects, work through problems, talk about distance learning in their programs, and really come out with some plans to implement distance learning or increase the distance learning that they're already offering. Also are a part of the Summer Institute, which is a statewide professional development. In the summer, there's a distance learning strand that we help to organize, so we will often present, encourage other people to present, and then also read the submissions from other people who want to present on distance learning. So we make sure that we get a good selection of distance learning offerings at that summer program. We do a lot of regional and other trainings throughout the state. And recently we've started to offer these self-paced online courses through Moodle. One is Distance Learning Basics, which is actually required of all programs in Minnesota that are offering distance learning. And that just ensures that everyone who is offering it has kind of a baseline understanding of what distance learning is and how to count those hours and what programs are allowed, not allowed. And then just this summer, we did an Integrating Digital Literacy in the ABE classroom, which is also a self-paced, focusing not so much on the distance learning, but on that digital literacy piece and getting students up to speed using computers and technology. Continues to have the virtual task force in it. And through that, we make policy recommendations. We vet new distance learning platforms. So if someone comes upon a platform that they think would be good for the state, we can vet that through the VTF, make a recommendation to the state. There's a wide number of communication sources. So we have a website. We respond to email requests, questions that come up, promotional materials. We have brochures. More and more, we're trying to collaborate with other statewide initiatives. So Minnesota's ABE is really trying to integrate the college and career readiness standards. We have a new statewide adult diploma, and we're trying to show distance learning kind of fits with those other initiatives. And as I mentioned, digital literacy is now really seen as being very much connected to distance learning. Students need those computer skills before they can really study on their own. So part of the grant includes North Star, which is a set of standards for digital literacy skills as well as assessments. And then the new the digital literacy in the ABE classroom that I mentioned. And this is the website that you're seeing now. And so we will update regularly with platforms that have been approved or platforms that are no longer approved or other information. It's got paid for professional development that people can access, and then just contact information so that if people have questions, that's a good way to reach us. The grant also focuses on some of that data development and improvement. So Minnesota uses MABE as a database to collect hours and test scores and all of that. And as part of MABE, we've had to develop things to make it a little bit more, to sit on the state, so that there are distance learning reports and naming conventions so that everyone is reporting the same information. And that's been a little bit of a challenge over the years to get really accurate statewide information. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you just a second. It sounds, I can hear somebody's music.
Okay, I can too.
Okay, I didn't know if that was yours.
I don't think it's mine.
If everyone could please mute themselves by pressing *6, or if you're on the computer, if you can mute your speakers or microphone, mute your microphone. Yeah, if we can do a quick mute, and then Renato will ask you to re-unmute yourself. Thank you for the suggestion. We're trying to figure out, we try to do it via the computer, and now we're trying to do it via the phone as well, to mute all. It seems like whoever's music it is that we're listening to, there might not be paying attention.
There you go.
Yeah, it makes me calmer.
If your user 30, unfortunately we can't mute you. So you'll need to mute yourself. When it says it's that's our code.
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.